Hello, this is the Green Corn Rebellion Show. I'm Gregory Harden II, and today I'm here with Jason Bollinger, who is a candidate for the U.S. Senate here in Oklahoma to replace James Langford. Repeal and replace James Langford. I need to say that. Anyway, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Good.
Whoa. Stop what you're doing. Okay. If you like this video and you like the other content on my channel, please hit the like button on this video. Also, go hit subscribe like right now. And also, when you hit subscribe, click the bell so you can get notifications whenever I put out a new video. So, thanks. All right, enjoy the rest of the video.
Let's see. First question I have here is, where are you from and where did you grow up?
Yeah. So I'm a lifelong Oklahoman. I grew up in Beckham County, Carter, Oklahoma. I typically just say Beckham County. Not a lot of people know where Carter is, but it is about halfway between Mangum and Elk City in Southwest Oklahoma, if you're familiar with the area. Grew up there. My mom was a public school teacher and she's retired now. And my dad is still the city manager in Carter, where I grew up.
That's cool. And what was I about to say? How old are you again?
Yeah.
I know you're pretty young, but I wasn't sure exactly how old you were. You're in your 30s, I assume.
I am 30. I actually turned 30 in June. So I am of constitutional age to be a United States Senator.
Wow. Yeah, you're young. Okay. Because I remember in your speech at your fundraiser the other night, you said that when you grew up, everyone was a Democrat in your area.
Yeah.
And I was like, how old is he? Like, I know he's young, but like he's not like, almost 40. But then I was thinking, I was like, oh, the registration in this county probably just flipped like last year in terms of
rural Oklahoma was kind of delayed in that, thankfully, I guess, in a lot of ways. But yeah, it was when I was a kid, everyone out there was a Democrat. My parents, and there's still quite a few, not as many, but a lot of Democrats that tend to lean conservative and vote Republican as well.
Yeah, it's the same here in Potawatomi County. But yeah, that was interesting. So yeah, 30. Oh yeah. Wow. So yeah. we're closer in age than I thought. That's pretty wild. All right. Well, so you went to high school, graduated from high school, and well, I mean, where did you graduate from high school? Then you went to SWOSU?
Yeah, right? I went to Merritt High School, which is in Elk City. It's a public school, but it's just right outside of Elk City, within the city limits. But Carter, where I grew up, didn't have a school. So I went all through school there and then went on to SWOSU, and I got my associate's degree there. And then went to OU to finish my bachelor's and got a bachelor's degree in accounting there. And then got my law degree also at OU.
Cool. All right. And what made you want to become a lawyer?
Yeah. So, it was, I was in business school getting my accounting degree and thought I was going to be an accountant, thought I might set for the CPA exam at some point. But I took business law, which is required for a business degree, and just loved it. Really in that class saw how much of an impact lawyers have on business, on our communities, and how much good work lawyers can do. And so that really sparked my interest in law school. And so I started researching and decided to go down that path.
That's interesting. Like as I've gotten older, I kind of wish I became a lawyer, but now I'm like, no, I really want to be a teacher. So I'm gonna reroute my entire career at this point.
Well, it's never too late.
That's true. And since you've become a lawyer, you've worked in the State Department.
Yeah.
What was your position, or what exactly did you do, and how did you end up working there?
Yeah, so I worked in the Office of the Legal Advisor at the State Department, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with the State Department, it's divided up into bureaus, you know, depending on the part of the world you're addressing or the specific issue. The Office of the Legal Advisor is its own bureau, and it's about 200 attorneys. And the legal advisor themselves is appointed by the president. And so I was in the Office of the Legal Advisor and was in the sub office of international claims and investment disputes. And so I worked mostly on the Iran-U.S. Claims Tribunal. The United States is continuing in litigation with Iran, stemming back from the Iran hostage crisis and back in the late 70s, early 80s, and was able to travel with the government to The Hague to litigate with the Iranians, and in the only diplomatic forum the United States has with Iran. And so that was a unique and a really interesting experience. But I got there, I took international law in law school, really enjoyed it. And my international law professor had previously worked in the State Department in the Office of the Legal Advisor, and then moved from DC to be a professor at OU, but was talking with her about what I wanted to do. And she, you know, introduced me to some folks, and you know, applied for the position and got it. And so really enjoyed that experience and learned a lot, taught me a lot about how DC works, how the executive branch functions, with the legislative branch, and you know, just all of these things that are going on across the world that most of us here on the ground in Oklahoma don't know about on a day-to-day basis, and the work that our government is doing to ensure that we don't have to know about them on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. And you worked under, like, during the Trump administration or during the Biden administration? Okay.
I was there during the Trump administration. So it was interesting. I was obviously on the civil service side, and certainly was not a political appointee myself. And, you know, the majority in these executive branch agencies, the majority of people doing the work are civil servants. They're not political. But the issue I was working on, the Iran-U.S. Claims Tribunal, was certainly something that would have been political and was political at times, because the Trump administration had a really strong position with respect to Iran. And so at a lot of times it was kind of tenuous as to what was going on. Would we continue to litigate? Would we continue to recognize the tribunal? Things like that.
Okay. And what made you want to run for this seat?
Yeah. So that response to that is two-part. You know, when I was working in DC, I got to observe firsthand how disconnected our entire delegation from Oklahoma is from what I was seeing on the ground here in Oklahoma, and, you know, the people I grew up with, my friends and family, and the issues that people here in Oklahoma face, because I got to see firsthand what they were working on. And let me tell you, it had most of the time absolutely nothing to do with Oklahoma. And so I was really you know, upset by that. And you know, also seeing some of the things that they were doing, that not only were they not for the benefit of Oklahoma, they were so completely antithetical to the job that we sent these people there to do, that it really made me angry. And so, you know, I worked there, and then I ended up coming back to Oklahoma City, joining a law firm, practiced law for several years. And then on January 6th, with the whole world, I watched as Senator Langford help fan the flames of an insurrection on our government. There's really no other way to describe what he did. You know, he ultimately voted as he should have, but that was after he had given his speech on the Senate floor, and that was after he had spent days and days, you know, questioning the election results. And then since that time, we have seen Senator Langford continue to fall into the throes of extremism and the extreme right, and to grow further and further disconnected from Oklahomans and the problems that we're facing here in Oklahoma. And so, you know, since my time in DC and seeing what I saw, I had been thinking about how I could get involved, where I might fit in, where I might best serve. And then after January 6th, I had my answer. We had to get Senator Langford out of there. And so I met with political consultants, you know, obviously talked it over with my friends and family, and we decided to jump into this race because of how important it is. You know, it's important to have number one, strong Democratic voices at the top of our ballot. And we are so lucky this election cycle to have that, having, you know, a contested governor's race. We have both of our US Senate seats on the ballot. And so that was part of it, but also ensuring that we could, as part of this campaign, reach out to Oklahomans and be a voice that Oklahomans, regardless of background, regardless of political affiliation, could really resonate with, because so many of these issues that impact Oklahomans on a daily basis are not partisan. They are issues that just need to be addressed and that Oklahomans expect their delegation in Washington, D.C. to be working on. And so, you know, I was questioned over and over early on, and still am. Why did you get into this race as a Democrat? And you're a young guy. You had a thriving law practice. Why would you jump into this race to challenge James Langford? But my answer over and over is, and it's been confirmed as I've traveled the state and talked with Oklahomans about the issues, people here in Oklahoma are not as extreme and they are not as divided as our politicians tell us we are, and as the media often tells us we are. We care about a lot of the same things, and we can find a lot of common ground if we'll just talk to each other. But, you know, we're told that we are different from our neighbors. We are told that, you know, our neighbors want to harm us or want to take something away from us. When, you know, I grew up in a small town in rural Southwest Oklahoma where everyone took care of their neighbors and everyone cared about what was going on in the community. And I know that Oklahomans as a whole feel that way. And so my purpose in getting into this race and in challenging James Langford was to get back to that and to get back to doing the work that actually impacts Oklahomans' lives.
Yeah. I get asked that question as well as a
Sure.
candidate, like why are you running specifically as a Democrat, but also as a young person, Black person from rural Oklahoma? Like, my district is technically mostly urban, but I live in the more rural part of my district. And, you know, I get that same question, and then I give some sort of an answer just like you gave. Like, we're not as divided like the media tries to make it sound like we are. I'm sure the polarization does exist on some level, but it's different, because I've had a friend of mine, he's a little bit older than you. Well, he's way older than you, actually. He's like 14 years older than you, but like he grew up in Oklahoma, been a Democrat his entire life, and he said to me, he's like, how are you gonna like get people to not like associate you with Nancy Pelosi or AOC? And it's like, well, I talked to them, and I mean, if they're a Republican and they've talked to me, we'll find some common ground on something. And, you know, and even if we don't find common ground on specific policies that we agree on, they still won't view me as whatever they think Nancy Pelosi or AOC is whenever that mailer comes out saying that I am, you know, Pelosi 2.0 or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you know, so it's like, but yeah, that's what I usually tell people is that like that sure, I guess that division is real, but it's not as stark when you actually get to talk to people. Like,
no,
yeah.
no, and like I said, so many of the issues, you know, access to healthcare, cost of healthcare, veteran services, public education, so many of those are nonpartisan. We are at the national level, we have made them partisan for some reason, and it's about controlling people, but they're really not. And you know, I always try to tell folks or remind folks that what's going on in national politics and what's going on in DC is oftentimes, for the reasons I described with James Lankford and the rest of our delegation being disconnected, it's oftentimes very different from what's going on here in Oklahoma. You know, it's all very inflated, and it's never as bad here in Oklahoma as what the national narrative makes it seem. Now we've got issues, of course. We have divisions, things like that, but Oklahomans in general don't think that way.
Yep. And never have either.
No.
I mean, at least in terms of our lifetime, I'm sure.
Right.
I'm sure back in the, you know, pre 1980s, whenever the Democratic legislature was basically like the state legislature was not just the opposite of what the composition is now, but it was like what, maybe 3 Republican state senators and maybe 10 Republican state reps, and you know, but even then, since in our lifetime, that division does not exist in that same way that people try to make it out to be.
No.
So before we start talking about some of these issues, I wanted to mention your primary opponent or runoff opponent, I guess.
Yeah.
Madison Horn, who is not Kendra Horn.
She is not.
And the race is going to be on August 23rd. Could you explain to me about how, okay, so first talk about how she wasn't registered until the week of filing, and then also talk about why you believe you would be a better candidate than her.
Yeah. So this is all kind of part of one in the same response. Madison Horn grew up in Oklahoma, but she moved away and was away for 15 years and moved back last year specifically to run for this seat. She told me herself she moved back to run for this seat. Madison Horn is not Kendra Horn. She is not related to Kendra Horn, and it's so important that people know that. We have learned since the primary election that a whole lot of people thought they were voting for Kendra Horn on June 28th. And you know, it just, they have the same last name. It's understandable that there is confusion. But all that to say, Madison moved here, had never voted in the state of Oklahoma and was not registered to vote here, did not register to vote, and attempted to register to vote 2 days before she filed to run for office. You know, our registration is not immediate here in Oklahoma, so technically she was not registered when she filed to run for office. And you know, she put information on her declaration of candidacy to file to run for office that, because she wasn't registered, was not accurate. And so you know, all of that happened. She had previously been registered in Arkansas. It looked like she hadn't voted since around 2008, was not registered as a Democrat when she was there. But you know, she's here running. And as far as why I'm the better candidate and the person best suited to challenge James Lankford and the person best suited to replace James Lankford for this seat is, First and foremost, because I have been here. Other than the little over a year I worked in DC, during which time I still had residence in Oklahoma. I was still voting absentee in Oklahoma. I've been here my whole life. I know the issues that Oklahomans are facing on the ground on a daily basis, and I'm connected with the state. It's my home. I didn't, this is not a transitory thing for me. I was here before the election. I'll be here after the election, no matter what happens. And so that's important. It's also important that I have been a Democrat since I registered to vote at age 18 and have been participating in our democratic process. Madison Horn can't say the same thing. I also, being a lifelong Democrat, I have never once, nor do I consider myself or would describe myself as a conservative. Madison Horn has called herself a conservative. It's also important to note my legal background and my government experience, because it's important when taking public office, especially at the federal level, that you know what you're doing, that you understand the Constitution. We know and have talked about the fact that our democracy is under attack, our institutions are under attack, the future of the Constitution is in question. And so we need people in there who understand how our government functions, understand our Constitution, understand and support the rule of law, and can get in there and get to work day one. Because James Lankford, since taking office in 2010, hasn't done a thing for the people of Oklahoma. And so there is so much to do. And as an aside, in fact, I would argue James Lankford has often worked against the needs and the best interest of Oklahomans. Look at his vote yesterday on expanding benefits, or day before yesterday, expanding benefits to veterans exposed to toxic burn pits. I mean, the list is long. There is so much work to do. We don't need to elect someone who is going to get in there and have a super steep learning curve and not get anything done. It also, we as Democrats, I think, acknowledge that James Lankford is while we disagree with most of what he says and does, he's a formidable opponent. He's well-spoken. He's an incumbent. He knows the issues. We need to elect someone and nominate someone who can stand toe-to-toe with him on the issues, who knows these problems front and back and can help find solutions. Madison Horn, I have yet to hear her talk about actual solutions. Everything I've seen from her, including on her website, if you look at it, it's all just very high level, pointing out the problems and saying, I'll work on this. Well, what are the actual solutions? How are you going to get it done? And so this is a choice on August 23rd between substance and someone who is just, leaning on the superficial. It is a choice between someone who has been here and someone who just got here. And, Madison Horn, she's called herself a conservative. We have a conservative in there already.
Has she really called herself a conservative, like literally, like this year on the campaign trail? That's interesting.
Okay. Yeah. Madison Horn is also Markwayne Mullen's cousin. And so, that's an interesting twist to all of this too, with Markwayne likely being Kendra Horn's opponent. So, there's just a lot there, a lot that causes question. It's an interesting scenario, but she has a convenient last name. And so that is why, we are working tirelessly. We have been since the primary and will be until Election Day, to be sure that Oklahomans know who they're voting for, to be sure that Oklahomans know that Madison and former Congresswoman Kendra Horn are not the same person or not related. Because this is an important race. It is, the issues that we are facing are too important to be playing games with. And so the choice is between someone who has been here, knows the issues, can do the job, and who has been participating in our democracy, and someone who hasn't and can't and doesn't know the issues because she's not been here.
Okay. So healthcare. You talk about the importance of expanding access and opening hospitals, because we've had a lot
Mhm.
of hospitals close in rural Oklahoma for the last decade or so.
Right.
Could you talk about the things that we need to do in order to expand coverage for people and also
Yeah.
possibly open up some of those hospitals or open up more hospitals in rural Oklahoma?
Sure. Well, one of the big issues we've seen in rural Oklahoma is the purchase of our rural hospitals that, many of which were often owned locally, they were owned by cooperatives, things like that. And they've been purchased by these larger conglomerates, in state and out of state. And then oftentimes they just closed. That happened in the rural hospital that was closest to where I grew up. It's happened all over the state. And so what this problem we've created then from that is people in rural Oklahoma going without the care they need, because in a lot of cases, people can't drive an hour, 2 hours to Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Lawton, wherever to get the critical care they need. And then, when people go without the care they need, the problems they have just are exacerbated. They get worse and worse before they actually get treatment. And these rural hospitals also are economic drivers in the communities they're in. They provide jobs. They help support the community in a number of ways. And so we are benefited in so many ways by ensuring that we keep these hospitals open. And when you and I spoke the other night, I told the story of what happened recently with my mom and the issues she had in a rural hospital. And it was nothing. It was not a dig at the rural hospital she went to itself, but it was the fact that the rural hospital she went to and was going to could not provide the services that she needed and did not have the level of expertise to address the problems that she was having. And like I said, she went months and months being treated for something that she didn't have. And then ultimately, as it got bad enough, they sent her to the emergency room at OU Medical in Oklahoma City, which was an hour and a half from where she lived. And we learned that she had stage 4 lung cancer. And so it's things like this. And on top of that, then we spent a month in OU Medical Center as she was undergoing treatment. She's home now, thankfully, still undergoing treatment, getting therapy to get stronger. But my mom was one of the lucky ones because she had health insurance. She has great health insurance. She had a means by which to get to OU. And she was able to advocate for herself and to keep pushing back as her needs were not being met. She knew that this was something more than what she was being treated for in the rural hospital. And so in that situation, I looked at, what are other people who are not my mom dealing with? In a lot of cases, without providing the services people actually need, we're leaving people to die. And that's not an acceptable system. And then add on top of that, the cost of healthcare. Like I said, my mom has great insurance, and so she won't be expected or required to pay the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars for her numerous hospital visits and the month in OU Medical Center. But we have created a system for many people where in order for people to get the care they need, they have to go bankrupt. And this is the United States. We are one of the wealthiest countries in the world, one of the most advanced countries in the world. It does not make sense to continue down this path, which is, in fact, more expensive in the grand scheme than other systems by which we could ensure that everyone has access to the care that they need. Everyone has, regardless of income, can get the care, that the care is close to home. We can do this. The federal government can assist in doing this, and it's something that we absolutely should do.
Yes. Yeah, one of the things that I've been talking about in my campaign is the hospitals closing up and wanting to see if the state of Oklahoma could possibly fund the building of new hospitals in rural Oklahoma, and then or something of that nature. And because like the hospital thing's a real problem. Like it's because it's not just a problem because we phrase it as a problem for rural Oklahoma because they're the ones that end up having to drive, a long period of time away to get somewhere. But it's also a problem for places that have hospitals still, because then you have people coming in, and like we did probably during the pandemic, we had people coming in from other parts of the state who were sick and then taking up all the beds, and then people who lived in those areas weren't able to get the care that they needed because yeah. Let's see, you also talk about importance of schools and education funding and making sure that teachers and students have the resources they need. Would you also want to increase funding for public colleges, universities, and would you also support student loan forgiveness?
So the answer to both of those is yes. On the second one, this answer to that is bigger than just a yes. As a candidate who has a substantial amount of student loan debt myself from going to a public university here in Oklahoma, getting an advanced degree, I know that the system is broken. I know that, I have a regular income. I'm able to make my student loan payments, but not everyone is in that same circumstance. And also, while I'm able to make the payments, this is such a mountain of student loan debt that for most people, it's not even fathomable that they would ever get this paid off. It's a burden they'll have until it's ultimately forgiven. And in our current system, if you're not in a public interest job, then when it's forgiven, it's taxable income. And so, yes, I support student loan forgiveness, but I don't support it without ensuring that we're addressing the problem on the front end. We have an issue with the cost of higher education. We need to look at, where is the funding coming from? What is the funding? What's being done with the funding? Why does it cost thousands of dollars per credit hour? Where is the money being spent? Where can we cut? I hate the idea of ever cutting funding or cutting services provided by higher education, because I benefited greatly from the multitude of services available at my public university, even those that were not related directly to my degree program. And so absolutely, we have a problem here. We have to address the student loan crisis, but we have to, if we don't do both, if we don't ensure that we're addressing this on the front end, then we'll wipe away debt and then have an entire new generation of people with the exact same problem. And so we have to do both.
Yeah. We definitely do have to do both.
Yeah.
Because that's another thing that I've been talking about on the campaign trail is the state of Oklahoma funding our public colleges and universities, because what was it? I want to say one of the presidents of one of the big universities, they told me that they're getting less funding from the state of Oklahoma than they did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And by less funding, they don't mean like per capita. They mean like literally less funding.
Right.
So, I was like, really? Like, how is that work? Like, that's insane. Like, you can't operate on like literally less money when everything has gone up in cost.
Right.
So yeah, that's a huge problem, is the state not really wanting to kick in their portion in order to make sure that tuition fees are not almost 50% higher than what they were whenever I started college.
Right. And, it's a result of tax cuts at the state level too. Yeah. We continue to cut revenue while never examining what the end result of that is going to be. Another thing that I've learned a lot about on the campaign trail, and it's through talking with members of our Democratic caucuses in the state legislature, We have a program, our public schools here in Oklahoma are funded through property tax. It's not a good system, but it's the system we have here in Oklahoma. Well, we have a lot of property here in Oklahoma that's owned by the federal government because of our military bases. We have tribal trust land, things like that. We have a system with the federal government by which the federal government pays its portion of the property tax for its property because, as a lot of people will know, the state can't directly assess a tax on the federal government. So we have to kind of circumvent the process to get the money back from the federal government. That system is the Federal Impact Aid Program. It really impacts school districts like Lawton Public Schools, where Fort Sill is, Mid-Dell Public Schools, where Tinker is located. And what I've learned is our federal delegation, mostly Senator Langford, Senator Inhofe, Representative Stephanie Bice, are failing to fight for the funding that Oklahoma is owed from the federal government. And so, and we're talking to the tune of millions of dollars. And so that money that is owed to the state of Oklahoma is not coming back to Oklahoma from the federal government. And so, one of my goals in the United States Senate is to ensure that Oklahomans are getting a positive return on their investment in the federal government. I do not want Oklahoma to be one of the states that is funding other states. All of the states have a net positive or net negative investment in the federal government. We all send, we pay income tax, we send it to the federal government. States like Arizona are getting way more money back in from the federal government than they're paying in. Oklahoma is not. Oklahoma is paying in more than we're getting. And I see that as a problem. I want Oklahomans to get, I want us to get what we are due and what we deserve from the federal government.
Okay, and the issue of tribal sovereignty.
Yeah.
Would you like to talk about that?
Absolutely.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So, the McGirt decision was a long overdue recognition and nod to the treaty obligations the United States and the state of Oklahoma have, and to the inherent sovereignty of our tribal nations here in Oklahoma and across the country. It came way later than it should have. It did create sort of some chaos, but that was because we were not operating as we should have been for years and years and years. And from my conversations with tribal leaders, DAs in counties across the state, especially those directly impacted, where their jurisdiction is directly impacted by this, had told me that they were figuring out solutions. Yes, it was a problem, but they were working with the tribal nations and their systems of criminal justice to, figure out joint policing arrangements, things like that. And then we had this new decision come down recently, the Castro Huerta decision, that really undercut McGirt, that rolled back a portion of McGirt and added a whole new layer of confusion to jurisdiction when it comes to criminal matters in Indian country. And so, first and foremost, I am a supporter of tribal sovereignty. When I was at the State Department, treaties were something I worked on every day, reading treaty language, ensuring that the United States was upholding its obligations, whatever countries we were partnering with were doing the same. This is the exact same situation. We have treaties with the tribes. All of this derives from treaty, and the United States and the state of Oklahoma have an obligation to comply with the treaties and to ensure that we are respecting the sovereignty of our tribal nations here in Oklahoma. And, as I, on the campaign trail, have had the opportunity to meet with and talk with tribal leaders all across the state about these issues, That's all they're asking for. They're asking for cooperation from the state. And we have, with this governor, seen an extreme attack on tribal sovereignty. And, we saw it initially with the Indian gaming compacts that, everyone knew he was wrong in the way he was approaching that and the narrative he was trying to push. And he ultimately lost, of course. But it has just been one thing after the other. And now blaming the tribes for the Supreme Court requiring the recognition of their sovereignty. This is just, it's untenable for the future. There are numerous examples across the state of ways that we as Oklahomans, all Oklahomans, whether you're a tribal member or not, are benefited from the state working with the tribes. We are benefited when we work together. We are made better when we work together. And the tribes are willing. The tribes are willing to address these issues with state leadership. And so, the biggest attack on tribal sovereignty we have is sitting in the governor's mansion, or not. We know he doesn't actually live there. Second to that is at the federal level. Senator Langford has sat on the Indian Affairs Committee in the Senate while all of this has gone on and done nothing to support our tribal nations. And as I visited with tribal leaders, many of them have told me they've never received a call from Senator Langford. They've never met with him, which is just beyond belief when he sits on the Indian Affairs Committee. Also, this recent attack on sovereignty and the Castro Huerta decision, we saw that came directly from the 3 extremist judges that were appointed and confirmed during Supreme Court justices that were appointed and confirmed during the Trump administration. And Senator Langford was complicit in their appointment and their confirmation. He voted to confirm all 3 of them. And so I think it's so important for Oklahoma's next United States Senator to be committed to respecting tribal sovereignty, preserving tribal sovereignty, but also to asking these questions in the confirmation process for federal judges about, what are your views on these issues? Will you commit to upholding tribal sovereignty? Because we've seen that the Supreme Court is where this stuff comes down. The Supreme Court is the ultimate arbiter of these disputes. And so we need Supreme Court justices who are on the right side of these issues.
Yeah, and would you like to talk about the filibuster? Do you support reforming and or abolishing the filibuster?
Yeah. So, and I'm not saying this to avoid the question, but we as Democrats spend a lot of time talking about the filibuster and what any one of us would like to do with the filibuster. Certainly, I recognize the filibuster serves as a barrier to progress. It has roots in racism, which is certainly problematic. But the reality is we can't do a thing with the filibuster with the current makeup of the Senate. We cannot carve out the filibuster, abolish the filibuster, which would be done through a rule change, until we have at least 2 more Democratic United States senators. And that is because the process by which we would make a change to the filibuster can actually be filibustered. And so I think that as Democrats, we're doing ourselves a disservice by internally, and it has happened over and over on the campaign trail. We're doing ourselves a disservice by debating about what we would do with the filibuster. The answer is we're not going to do a thing about the filibuster until we elect 2 more Democrats to the U.S. Senate. And Oklahoma has such an opportunity this election cycle to do that. Oklahoma can change the narrative with respect to the filibuster. Oklahoma can open the floodgates with respect to pushing progressive legislation and getting these things like the Women's Health Protection Act, the Respect of Marriage Act, the Equality Act through the United States Senate. If we elect both me and Kendra Horn to the United States Senate, we have the opportunity to do it here. We can create the momentum that we saw in Georgia to get this done. We have a unique situation having both of our U.S. Senate seats on the ballot this cycle. That typically does not happen, as most people know. And so, yes, the filibuster is problematic. I in general support setting aside the filibuster, carving out the filibuster, especially when it comes to voting rights, things that directly impact democracy, things that directly impact the rights of individuals. But we can't get there until we elect more Democrats. And so it's kind of a moot point until we do that. So our focus should absolutely be on electing more Democrats and asking the candidates how they would vote on these issues, these particular pieces of legislation, because that's what matters.
Oh, and the point you made about how usually we don't have two senators on the ballot. Last time that happened was actually 2014.
It was. We've had Oklahoma has had this opportunity more than most other states.
In fact, I think it actually also happened in 2002 as well.
Yeah, it did.
Because what was it? Someone stepped down or something, or something of that nature. Then it was Brad Carson versus Coburn, and then Inhofe versus, I can't remember who it was. I want to say it was Walters, but maybe that was a different year. But like it was that year too. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, we've had it happen fairly frequently here in Oklahoma. But it's not how the process is supposed to work in normal times. But we have this great opportunity before us. We have such a great slate of Democratic candidates on the ballot, candidates that can bring the momentum to the ballot box on election day, can energize and engage people across the state, even out of state, to bring money into these elections. And so this is a great opportunity, and I want all of us to grab onto it and get this done, because electing more Democrats to the Senate is what is the most important right now.
All right. And the last question I have here is, what kind of music do you listen to?
Oh, man.
Who are your favorite music artists?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because I pretty much just listen to, when I'm in the car, I listen to podcasts and the news and stuff. Or these days when I'm in the car, I am on the phone doing call time. So, I listened to part of Beyonce's new album that came out yesterday. It's fantastic. I like country, some country, like newer country, and mostly like new stuff, pop, who's not a Lady Gaga fan, things like that.
Yes, definitely Lady Gaga.
Yeah, kind of all over the place.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Where can we find you on social media, and what is your campaign website?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. And our website is jasonforoklahoma.com, and that's Jason, F-O-R, Oklahoma.com. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Everything is Jason for OK, except for Twitter, which is Jason_Bollinger. Please reach out. We have contact email on our website. Sign up to receive a yard sign, sign up to volunteer, and please donate if you can. I know everyone has candidates asking them for money right now, but that is truly the most important thing you can do, and the most directly beneficial thing you can do for a candidate running right now is to give them money. If it's $5, $10, the money goes a long way. Everything we do costs money, and we as Democrats don't have this money flowing in from out of state and for big corporate interests that the Republicans have. And so we are running grassroots operations. Please be part of that movement and support us. And again, reach out with any questions. I'm happy to answer any questions. And thank you so much. I enjoyed being on.
Thank you, and good luck to you on August 23rd.
Thank you. That's the other thing I'll say real quick. August 23rd is the election day for the runoff. For most of the state, on the Democratic ballot, it is only our race. There are a few city council races, county commissioner races across the state, but for the majority, it is only this U.S. Senate runoff. And so please don't forget that date, August 23rd. Get out and vote, take your friends, drive people to the polls. And you could still, I believe, request your absentee ballot if you want to vote from home. So please just don't forget to vote.